Hi, Olivia. How are you today?
Hi, good morning. I'm great. How are you?
Good. Good morning to you too. I love the fact that you greeted me with a good morning. That's beautiful. A lot of people actually miss that part of it. They just say hello and they kind of scoop right through onto something different. So thank you for actually greeting me.
Well, I'm here because you're a lovely person, and I'm just overjoyed to be able to join you in conversation today.
Well, I have to say, Olivia, the morning that I met you at Liz Heller's house for this networking breakfast, you walked in with this amazing necklace on. And first of all, you have an amazing sense of style. So I was immediately attracted to, like, wow, she puts that outfit together so well. But secondly, you have this amazing necklace on, and we had this honest conversation from the beginning. And it really attracted me to want to know more about you and go deeper. So interestingly enough, through that honest conversation, to realize that you are the co-founder of a mental hygiene company called PYM, Prepare Your Mind, which I thought was super cool acronym. I basically was like, wow, well, no wonder she speaks her truth. She shows up in truth and she walks her walk and talk. And that's pretty cool. A lot of people don't do that.
Well, thank you. I think one of the greatest gifts we can give each other as human beings is to allow ourselves to be seen and to see other people. And so that really is how we build connection and community.
Absolutely. And I think that actually speaks to the other company that you have, because you're a two-time founder. One, of course, being a co-founder of PYM, but on the opposite side, you have actually a social app that's for women to find friends called VINA. And it's in 158 countries. And clearly you've reached millions of women. And just before we were getting on the call, you and I were talking, and I said, wow, how did you do that? Because and when you said, like, I'm clearly not the first person with this idea, right, but the first person to be able to really get it off the ground, because I know it's very difficult, having run women's groups and having my own female community, for investors to take that type of interaction or community seriously, to buy into it. So I'm super excited you're here today, because I think you are touching on two very timely topics. One is mental wellness and mental hygiene, and having supplements available for us to address those things, because our country and world is in a state of disarray with mental wellness. But on the second side is, we know one of the ways to combat that is through building community. And to have an available community for people to go to is also an amazing gift. So anyways, welcome today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Sorry I didn't bring any more flair today. It's kind of a cozy, cold day in
Oh
LA.
my
So
gosh.
I'm
Well,
bundled.
as we know, it's been cold on and off in LA for now months.
Six
And
months.
yeah, and speaking of mental wellness, we know that vitamin D and is part of actually good hygiene as well. So, but anyways, why don't we start off with, kind of tell me a little bit about how you came to being a founder? And you talked a little bit about it before we got on the call about your drive, but how did you end up not only being a one-time entrepreneur but two-time entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I moved to San Francisco in 2009, so very early tech days. I had taken a semester off in college and lived there in 2006, built some friendships with some early Facebook folk, and just really struggled when I moved there in 2009, finally, after I graduated college, and finding friends. And it was really lonely. I would try to meet people here and there. We didn't have mobile phone, we didn't have apps on our phones at that point. And it's so weird to think that that was not that long ago, but that was also a lifetime ago in technology
Oh my
speak.
gosh, yes.
And so I had started working in a lot of different tech companies. And my first company that I worked at was actually food and beverage product development. So that kind of came full circle later when I started developing food products or supplements. But then I worked in consumerization for IT in the enterprise. I worked in like early days of cryptocurrency. I worked in some education startups. And finally, I had this realization that all of these dudes, for lack of a tech
Yes.
bros, were not actually any smarter than I was. And so I had this revelation that you know what, everyone is literally figuring it out because everyone is doing something that's never been done before. And so really the great leader isn't someone who's done a lot of stuff and worked in the industry forever. A great leader is a great problem solver and someone who is able to identify problems that they see in the world or in the market. They're able to understand people and want to know what people want and have ability to actually see that in the future, and then have the ability to get things done and not be hindered by the constant problem solving and have that resilience to make it through difficult things. But because creating something from absolutely nothing but an idea, there's going to be a lot of hurdles in that process, and there's going to be a lot of things that come up against you. And it's just a matter of continuing to show up day after day and work through the problem, whatever that problem is that day. And so I always had this metaphor for myself of, I'm climbing a mountain and I'm never going to make it to the top of the mountain if I just stare at it. So I'm going to focus on the trail ahead of me and whatever obstacles come my way, whether it's a giant chasm and I need to build a bridge, whether it's a fallen tree and I need to figure out how to chop it up or climb over it or whatever it is. But I'm just going to focus on what that next 10 feet in front of me is. And so I decided to really solve this problem that I had seen over and over and over again in my career and the lives of other people, especially in my 20s. And I think you're going through so many different transitions. You leave college. Where do those friends go? You move everywhere in the world. Your friends are leaving for jobs, moving from their hometowns, moving to big cities, getting married, having babies. There's all these different life changes, and you need a network for that, and you need friends for that. And I had a unique perspective that I knew none of these tech bros could probably achieve, is the fact that I knew women. I had an understanding what was going to be trendy and cool and what people wanted. And I also knew the other side, where I've been working in deep tech and understand how to talk in the tech industry, how these companies work, how to build connections, and actually how to build the software. And so I decided to bridge those two together and take a concept that I had used and try to hack my way through to make friends and apply it to this problem around women needing friends. And so it was really great for us to do that. We launched in 2016. So that's quite a time ago now. We were really the first ones ever to put something like this in mainstream market. And within days, we were trending on the App Store. We had hundreds of news headlines, from the New York Times to Cosmopolitan to being on the Tyra Banks show. We had Cardi B review the app on the doctors.
Wow.
So really all of these things that don't typically get talked about, because we had built the Tinder for women's friendships. And there's kind of this big exhale of, oh my God, finally this exists. Like finally, like some girl broke through this like glass barrier and put this out, and we can download it on our phones and we can start doing this. And it was this beautiful community birth. But in doing that, I took on a bunch of capital from, these top tier VCs, and there was a lot of pressure on me. We were the first app outside of Instagram to ever have 100,000 people download it in its first week on the App Store.
That's a big deal.
So this was a big deal, and there was a lot of pressure on me, and I started to feel like I was crumbling under this pressure. I suddenly had a team, and they had families and rent and children to feed, and
lots of overhead.
I was like, oh, I actually don't know what I'm doing. And in a way that actually scares me. I invested in hiring coaches to really help me. I don't know what I would be or how I would have made it without amazing coaching to support me through it. But I needed something for that stress and anxiety. And I knew that all of these intentionalities that I could have in the world, like I knew I could breathe and meditate and walk and all of these things that we know we can do that are good for us. I was so stuck in that fight or flight that I couldn't think about them. I could make a to-do list that was a mile long, and I could stare at it and feel absolutely frozen. And how will I ever be able to do all of these things? How will I be able to meet these goals? And I was one foot in front of the other, but I was in a complete daze. And so that's when I really started to lean into amino acids and learning about how I could actually supplement my brain to start functioning and get that flywheel going. And so lo and behold, of course, what an entrepreneur does, I ended up starting
Hey,
a
I see
company
a
around it.
problem. I need to solve it. Yeah.
Yeah, but my husband had, a huge loss in his life. He lost his father very publicly to suicide, and so had the trauma of growing up in the public eye and then losing his father in the public eye, and then, grieving very publicly and having kind of the weight of the loss that everyone else felt from losing his father, who's Robin Williams. So I think that, maybe gives them more context, but had that. And he was starting to find relief through acts of service, but wasn't actually able to fully, he was still waking up with this huge weight on his chest. And I was like, this man is amazing and like fabulous. And I couldn't tell him about these supplements that I've been using that I found such great success. And I kind of became a bit of a spokesperson for these things, because you could feel so much better so quickly and also not feel weird at all and not feel out of it. You could still show up to work, give a presentation, run a team, make a press appearance, pitch a VC, whatever, all these things that you need to do, and not feel like you're battling some weird version of yourself that you're powering through just to feel like okay and not have a panic attack.
Yes.
And so we ended up starting this other company, PYM. It's actually Zach's middle name, but his name is not an acronym. We turned it into one. It stands for Prepare Your Mind. And so really focusing on those nutrients that can prepare your mind to live its best life, to actually function in the way that it's designed to.
And sort of preparing your mind to receive whatever it comes toward you in a day, because we know that there's natural stressors in every person's day, no matter, like you're saying, if you have a lot of self-care that you put into place, it doesn't matter, because we're faced with these types of choices of how we want to respond, and we often need another tool, So my question for you is, so you launch this social app that basically helps women and build community, right? But how do they use it? Like, how do you go about, like, you download the app and then do I go to virtual events or do I go to in-person events? Is it a blend of both, or how does that work?
Yeah, so think of it similarly to a dating app, but if you've never used a dating app, I'll give it the kind of blank slate approach. So you take some personality quizzes, you fill out some fun questions about yourself, a small bio, some pictures, answer some fun questions like what's your guilty pleasure or how do you spend your Sundays? And then you're presented with cards of people who are near you. So you swipe left and right, and once people have both opted into connecting, then you get the opportunity to message each other. And this really helps lower the barrier kind of social rejection and that fear that we all have, because we don't know that someone's opted in until we've also chosen them in return. And so, each time you get an introduction, there's like an Olivia robot. I turn myself into a robot. And so you get an introduction that highlights what you have in common. So for us, it would say, Olivia, Michelle, you two should meet. You're both passionate about entrepreneurship. Like, how about grabbing a coffee and talking about your newest idea? And so make a little recommendation. And then we leave it to you to make plans. We know that you have enough skills to make some plans with each other, but the challenge is actually finding who is interested and available and wants to meet and is interested in the same things you are. So really, we make those connections. And so this is kind of focused on the feminine way of making friends, which is very like storytelling, personal identity focused. But we also recognize that women make friends both in masculine and feminine ways. And the traditionally masculine way of making friends is through activities. And so we actually launch a part in the app that is focused on pitching an activity, like something to do. And it could be an event. Like we've had everyone throw from like their birthday parties on there to karaoke nights to trips to Mexico or other places in the world, roller skating, you name it. People post whatever they're doing, and then people from the community can join. Or you can invite other people that you've connected with in the community to have these events. We also have a feature called Party Chat, which we launched during the pandemic, which allows you to just kind of log in and chat with other women in the community. And this has no geolocation to it whatsoever. So you could end up connecting with someone in anywhere in the world. And so it's a really fun way to just chit chat from home if you're maybe not in a place where you want to be able to go out or you can go out. So that's really what we focus. We just did a huge activation at Coachella this year with Absolute, where we did Absolute Friendchella,
Oh,
had
that's
some fun
cute.
quizzes, had some meetups at Coachella, sent a couple of our members from the community to the concert. So it's a lot of fun. It's very, very community oriented.
So you pay a monthly fee or annual fee, or how does it actually, how do you go about, kind of joining?
Yeah, it's free to join, and you can meet people for free. You can post events for free. You can match. We do have some premium features that help you match more quickly or feature your profile. It allows you to add more pictures to your profile, change your location to places where you're not. So if you're like traveling to London in a few weeks, you can pre-network before you show up and set up some people to hang out with before you go. So things like that, some more of the premium features. That ranges anywhere from like $5.99 a week to you can pay $50 for 6 months.
And who's your target audience? Like what age demographic, curiously?
Yeah, about 80% of our audience is between 18 to 35.
Okay. And so, like, in your case, like when you decided to devise this app and things like that, I mean, community is probably like a pretty important value of yours, right? And when you were talking about, I moved to San Francisco, I didn't have a lot of friends. And so it was one way to also solve that, have a solution, right? Because you're solution oriented. What does community really mean to you, and what does it do for you in general? Like, how do you use your community every day?
Yeah, I am a fundamental believer that when you have community, you have everything you need in life. If you have strong relationships, you will never be without a home, without a meal, without a job, without someone to talk to. So I think really investing in community, like humans need each other. It's scientifically proven. It actually changes our DNA. I have a medical advisory board that I built for VINA in order to kind of build the medical cause that I really believe that it has. It's not just, the US Surgeon General actually said that the number one epidemic prior and post COVID was loneliness. And this is the biggest
I agree.
predictor of our mortality. You're more likely to die from loneliness than you are from any disease, living under near a freeway, from the flu, from alcoholism or obesity. You're more likely to die from isolation
Mm,
than any of those. And it's also will change how you're able to recover from disease. So being in proximity to other people and having that closeness, having those relationships will actually increase your ability to recover from virus and illnesses. A study has shown, there was this amazing study that I love that focused on HIV positive men who were homosexual. And so those who were in the closet versus those who were out of the closet, those out of the closet who had more unauthentic, life where they have
okay.
connection, feel
Yeah.
seen and be and
Yeah.
are seen, had a much, much longer lifespan. We're
Mm.
actually able to live significantly longer than those who did not. And so I think there's just really interesting research. There's a great researcher named Steve Cole who looks a lot at that genetic expression. He's based out of UCLA. So really community to me is everything. It's really the root of everything that we have. It's interesting, you think about fight or flight, and we're not often taught this, but women have another stress response, and that's tend and befriend. And so, you have this fight or flight response that I think we're all very trained to. We live in a very patriarchal society. But women will often be seen in stressful environments to actually connect and take care of their community, particularly their young community members. But that is this magic that women have when it comes to a stress response. And they actually have this ability where they've been able to measure it, is that by having these intimate conversation, it actually helps your body discharge cortisol. So you might have a great conversation with a friend and actually walk away from it and say, wow, I feel so much better. And
Mm.
there is a medical reason for this. Your body is releasing the stress from your body through that connection.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point about connection and just in general how women connect to one another, right? Whether that be in the workplace or outside of the workplace, and clearly why your app has been so successful in that way. The one thing that I wanted to ask you around is like, because when you're talking about the, post and during COVID epidemic of loneliness, is that what we know to be true about society is that we're the most connected that we've ever been with devices, right? And having the opportunity to have it, but yet the least connected. And why do you think that is?
So there's another scientific explanation for this.
Love it.
I actually
I
studied this
love this, Olivia. You're
in
speaking
college.
my language.
It's called the parasocial effect. And so
Say that again.
the parasocial effect, or the parasocial theory or interaction theory, if you want to get really technical in the
I
terms.
like it.
And this is actually where our and our brains start to form these relationships. If you think of social interaction as nourishment, so similar to eating food. And if you're eating a bunch of super processed gummy bears, candy, your body thinks that it's eating. It's getting calories, like the nutrient, something is happening, and you're chewing, digesting is happening, but your body is starved of nutrients if that's all you're eating. And we know that we'll end up really sick if that's all we're eating.
Totally.
So very similarly with relationships, we can actually, our brain can think that we're having these social interactions. So parasocial interaction theory actually used to be just around mass media. So, it started with the radio, really came a lot of out in like the 50s or 60s when women were at home with soap operas on TV. And actually these women, they studied them, thought that they were having a real relationship with that soap opera.
With the people on the
that
soap
person
opera.
was a real person, that they had a real relationship, because they were spending so much time kind of in isolation having this relationship. So their brain started to think that this
is real.
This is a real person. This is a real person I know. We're having a social experience. And so now fast forward, we're doing that with people that we actually know in real life. We see them, but we're actually not having a two-way interaction. Like, you're liking their picture. That person who just went to Italy over the summer, or like had a baby or got married or something, they're posting this publicly, and we're consuming it as if we're having a conversation with that person. So our brain's like, ding, ding, ding. We're having social interactions. We know Michelle is our friend. Michelle and I have a close relationship. I know about her kids' names. I know her family. I know what they did, where they would go to school. But Michelle is not having that relationship with me. And so Michelle and I are not having a synchronous.
It's not an integrated relationship.
Yes. And so, but my brain doesn't know the difference. And so this is what's happening with our screens, especially with social media. I think we need to emphasize on media and the difference between networking.
Totally agree.
Social networking is really what VINA is focused on. Like, I actually stayed really specifically against having a ton of media, because I want the goal to always be that you are going to see that person in real life. Sometimes there were barriers to doing that during the pandemic, but you can actually measure the energy exchange between people at 6 feet. So an EKG machine can hold up to you 6 feet away and can measure some energy from your body. So the great irony of the pandemic is that we were 6 feet apart. But that energy exchange happens when you're in the presence of other people. And so doing that, and then having a reciprocal relationship exchange with someone where you're being seen and that other person is having that same experience that you're in that moment, creates, like, basically, you're eating broccoli, if you will. Like, there are real nutrients in there. There's the body's digesting it. There's fiber. There's all these things that we need for healthy living. And so it's really interesting what happens when we can disassociate a little bit through a screen. It's like maybe one step away. Like, we're having a more social interaction because we're in a two-way conversation right now.
Exactly. And we can actually see one another.
We can see one another, but it still is not, it's like a little bit better. Think about that as like the granola bar or something like that, where it has like vitamins and minerals, and you're like, okay, well, that's great. I'm getting nutrients. It's pretty healthy. We're doing well here, but it's still not the same as eating a completely unprocessed meal. It's not as high quality as like a salad might be.
Exactly. Which is why you always leave wanting more, like, from an interaction, if it wasn't in person. Because that the 6 feet component of feeling someone's energy, you could still feel energy through. That's why you can do sessions over Zoom and things like that, right? But I think it's interesting to me when you're talking about like how to truly connect, you're talking specifically more about media. And I think it's interesting, I'm sure similar for you, because I know you're active on social media. People see you and then they're like, oh, I like they almost feel like they know you better than they do because they feel like they've actually been with you through these experiences, but they're only snapshots, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And it's like, and we oftentimes after having a long digital interaction with someone, will feel like almost like a sugar crash. We're like, whoa, that took a lot out of me. Like I'm exhausted from that. But it's this interaction that, you want more, but it's also like been a lot. And so it's very interaction, like, I don't think we know the full science of exactly what's happening in our body. There's this magic of when you're in person, you hug someone or you
Yeah.
touch, there's oxytocin that gets released. And these are really important hormones that we need for battling and balancing stress and having positive mental health and having our digestion systems work and all of these things.
Yeah, because I think, as we know, it's all interconnected, right? I mean, physiologically with touch, physiologically also with what we eat and how we experience emotion. So, my question for you is if we were to take the concept of loneliness and sort of parlay it into other emotions, whether it be depression or different things, I know that's part of the reason why you formed PYM was because you were looking to have a more homeostasis or a happier environment for people, right? That they lived from a more mental wellness perspective. So, how do you go about doing that? I know you touched on amino acids, right? But how many amino acids are they? How do they work within our system? And I remember when I met you, I was like, oh, so is it CBD? And like I have so many questions about that, like why CBD versus everybody's taking mushrooms now, right? Like, and I'm not talking about the psychedelic ones, I'm
Yeah.
talking in general, right? And how does this go with amino acids in general?
I mean, all of these things are so interconnected. I think the root of all of this is that our diets are depleted, and you could be eating like the healthiest diet in the world and lots of all whole foods and very diverse and all of these things. But our soil health is totally depleted. Our oceans are full of you know pollutants, and like we're just living in an environment today that we constantly have to be focused on these things, and supplementation has become pretty essential for everyone's well-being. And our mental health isn't just amino acids. Amino acids are proteins. If you're not familiar with it, they're proteins, and proteins that feed neurotransmitter or muscular tissues in your body. And so our neurotransmitters really rely on amino acids as like their food for function. That being said, it's not just amino acids. So 95% of your serotonin is actually manufactured in your gut. And so we actually there's something called a psychobiotic, but it's just a probiotic. And it's the 6 strains of bacteria that are actually scientifically shown to be responsible for creating serotonin and creating dopamine. Is a lot of it's made in your gut, oxytocin made in your gut, GABA made in your gut. So you need to be eating these gut feeding foods. And sometimes I joke that we're kind of just transformers for bacteria. Like I think I'm in charge, but like the bacteria are really running this giant robot body of mine. But really that is
Energetic body.
yeah, my giant energetic body. There's nothing robotic about it. But this human flesh body. And so that's why we created these mood biotics. I just have them sitting here because I always have them on my desk. That's the only way I can remember to take them. But these mood biotics, so those are actually the ones that are specifically focused on manufacturing more of the neurotransmitter that you need. And then we also have essential minerals and vitamins. So a lot of people have an MTHFR gene mutation. If you don't know what this is, you can find out if you have 23andMe. You can just turn on the health feature of it, or there's different sites where you can upload your DNA test to find out. But roughly 40% of people have an MTHFR gene mutation. And what this means is that your body cannot break down B vitamins in the way a normal body can. And so you actually have to have pre-methylated vitamins. So your methylation cycle is broken. I won't get into like the biology of that. I'm also not a doctor. But what that means is you have
You
to take
sure are smart.
I did go to Institute of Integrative Nutrition, and I'm an integrative health coach. So and I have spent, my life really focused on learning about my body, because I think especially women are often disempowered from their bodies. Like someone else is in charge. The doctor in the room is in charge. The psychologist is in charge. Your parents are in charge. Like the state is in charge. But like we really need to be empowered to take control of our body. And we need to know that we're the only ones that really understand and know what's happening for us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people taking their best guess, but you can actually, learn how to read some medical journal entry documents. You can actually learn how to assess if an article has the right medical journal, citations. And you can actually learn a lot about these kinds of things. There are amazing people who are having podcasts on these types of things. Like I love Huberman Labs. I love Dr. Mark Hyman. There's these functional medicine doctors, which have been traditionally very, very hard to see. One, it's like getting an appointment with them. Two, they're extremely expensive. And three, like they often are not available across the country and definitely don't take insurance. So the more that we can start educating and becoming, the advocate and the CEO of your body.
All of it, by the way, because I think in younger generations, we were never really taught to be empowered about being an advocate for ourselves. Like it was always just, we accepted whatever it was, whether it be your boss or frankly, your parents. You weren't always even educated about, your own bodily health, like as far as like being on the pill and what that means and, that kind of thing. So I totally agree with you. The earlier you can educate yourself, the better.
Absolutely. So we really focus on like the essential vitamins, minerals, fats. Your brain is 60% fat, and you don't manufacture fat for your brain. You have to consume it. So if you're on like an exceptionally low fat diet, which I think can be, something really hard. I was vegan for many years, and your body can become quite starved of fats if you're not adding enough omega-3 fatty acids in. DHA and EPA are all found in these. The essential minerals like magnesium, zinc, copper, these are really, really essential for your brain functionality. And our soils are depleted of them. So like you really can't get it without supplementation nowadays. So that's really what we focused on, is building out a suite of like all these foundational nutrients that you need to have optimal functioning mental health.
Yeah, one of the things you talked about before you got on the call was the quality of the supplements. And so, the supplement business is a huge industry, as we know. You probably know the actual data as far as the size of the category. However, how do we know that we're getting the optimal dosages and the quality that we need? And I know that's one of the things you really focus on.
Yeah, I think it's tricky because it's not a highly regulated area. I mean, and more is not better always. Like you don't want to just buy the thing that has the most, like taking more is not going to make it better. And I think that was like an uninformed initial mindset that I had in this area, was that I felt like, when I was buying probiotics, like buy the one with the most CFU, and like that's not better. That can actually make you feel worse if it's too much and like your body's like overloaded. And so finding really just kind of the right balance, and you need to be able to be in a state where you can actually start kind of experimenting with yourself. Buy from reputable manufacturers, look for people who, you can understand who the brand is, you understand more about it, it's sold in reputable places. And so that's really important. But really you have to make sure what you're buying is also safe. I mean, there's a lot of claims out there. There is a lot of regulation on claims, but I think everybody's so bio-individual that what's going to work for me is not going to be the exact same thing that works for you.
Totally. So, when you look at, you have these two companies, right, that you're running, and you're a mom of not just two small children, You also have animals that you're taking care of in a household. How do you balance it? Like, how do you, I mean, obviously, we all need support and help, but how do you say, okay, when I look at my week and I think of mental health, right, and staying as balanced as possible, how do you approach your week?
It's definitely a week by week thing. Something I did really early on where I felt like I was like never working enough or never showing up enough as a partner for my spouse, or just like neglecting myself or my friendships. I created something called a time budget,
Mhm.
or I made it up. I called it myself a time budget. But I basically looked at every single week, planned out exactly how much time I needed proportionally for different areas of my life. And definitely it varies week by week more. I feel like now that I have children and you never really know what you're going to get on a weekly basis.
About moment by moment. No, I'm just kidding.
But and and I don't think I'm doing more than like the average person. I definitely, yesterday I took 90 minutes to go get my nails done because I was like, I really need to do that. I know that taking care of myself in that way is really good for my mental health. I'm going to carve out that time, but I keep blocks here for myself so that way I can take care of those self-care needs.
Mhm.
I also shoot content about our products and I need to be able to take a picture of my hands. And I can't do that if I have blue nail polish on from a month ago. And
Yeah.
these things that feel like self-care are also sometimes built into being an entrepreneur. And so just kind of letting everything be efficient as possible with my time, but also not being afraid to ask for help and also just offload things that I know that I'm not going to be the best at and be really good at holding those people accountable. I think becoming a manager is and not just becoming a manager because you're managing people, but becoming a manager as a mindset,
Mhm.
and as a behavioral pattern that really makes a big difference because it's holding people accountable. It's setting expectations of what's going to be done and when. I really love Eve Rodsky. I don't know if are you familiar with her,
Yeah.
but she wrote a book
Yeah.
called Fair Play. She has this amazing card deck of cards and divvying them up between my spouse and I. And then also we had a pile of like, we're just agreeing that like we're going to hire out these cards because neither of us have the capacity to handle that on a regular basis. And obviously that's a bit of a luxury to be able to do that. And that becomes like a managing who you're hiring out to do those things. But it's not my job. Like for certain things that I just don't do, I love just having it completely off my plate and I don't have to think about it. Thank you, Eve, out there, if you ever listen to this. But she's
Yeah.
amazing.
I have to say, like, I think it's a great form and tool for communication too. And there's a lot of difficult conversations that need to be had with partners, but also whether it be your teammates and where you work, but knowing your boundaries on what you know that you're willing to do and not willing to do in the game is actually like a great tool to use for that. It's a great conversation starter and completer, you know. My question for you is, in being an entrepreneur, knowing that it's not easy to be good at everything, what would you say is your greatest strength? Like something that like hands down, like you talked about problem solving, but greatest strength other than problem solving, and something that like I don't want to have to deal with that, but I have to because I do everything. I'm just kidding.
um, I mean, I think the great thing about starting a company with somebody else versus my first company where I was really like founder CEO is having someone that we can decide like who to balance, who's good at what. And I loathe fundraising. Like I'm going to say it, it's
That's
not a fun
good.
process. There's no
That's
fun in
awesome.
fundraising, but he is quite good at it. And it also helps that he's a white male. Like statistically
Since he's
speaking,
talking to his own
better
people.
odds for him than me. I hope we can change that, but reality is what reality is. And so like
Nice
right
part
now,
is that there are two of you in the room, right? So
yeah,
like you probably, I mean, I'm sure that you go on pitches by yourself too, but
I show up when we're closing a deal and we're getting in the weeds of a lot of stuff. And he does a lot of speaking engagements. Like I don't love to be the face of our company. Like I love connecting and sharing the things that I've learned, but As far as like who's going to raise their hand for a media circuit, that I would be happily behind the scenes just building things. So I just, shipped him off to Mexico City for a fundraising conference with a bunch of our investors and a bunch of FaceTime and media presence. So I'm so happy to like have a partner where I can just send those things over. I love building systems. I don't love managing systems. So I love, being able to hire teammates and have teammates that really like we can build out these frameworks, we build out these databases, we build out these structures for how we're going to operate things, and then really holding them accountable to like making sure that we're measuring everything towards the direction that we want it to go. So I'm definitely I have ADHD, like I'm less good in
I think everybody does now. I'm like diagnosed or undiagnosed. I think another benefit to media and another non-benefit possibly, but maybe you have a study for that one too. Just kidding.
Yeah.
She's like, I do actually. So what would you say your greatest learning is in being an entrepreneur?
My greatest learning. I mean, nothing. I think my greatest learning is that nothing's going to kill you. Like it's all just like letting things just wash over me and not letting every small fire, you know, like nothing can touch me. Like it's fine. Like I will be fine. I've been through it all. I've been through the deepest, darkest times of it. I've laid off people. I've been a team of one. I've built teams. I've raised money. I've lost money. I've like, you will make it through it all. Worst case scenario, you'll go get another job and like it will all be okay. And so I think that's my greatest learning is just to like let go of a lot of things and not letting it really get to me. It probably helped that I have eaten like these for like twice a day for 3 years now. So these are our mood shoes. This is like our acute stress and anxiety support. So really, I just don't have that like as tightly wound active stress response that I think I would had prior.
Well, I think, I mean, in fairness, if you look at your life since 2016, launching two companies, probably getting married during that time frame too, and having a, you know, also having two children during that time
Yeah.
frame.
Well, I was married when I started my first company. I went through a divorce. That was really challenging.
Yes.
That's when like I really, really needed these. There was a lot of panic attacks while fundraising. I moved cities. I've, been through potential acquisitions. I've had kids. I've gotten remarried and global pandemic, lots of things have happened.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing is what you're saying kind of goes back to the earlier part is taking those steps, right? And just not looking too far ahead, right? But knowing that through all of these things, you can get through it. So, one of the things that I was curious about, because you said that you worked with a lot of coaches during the time that you were actually launching your first company and VINA. And so my question was like, how did that impact you? Were you working with a lot of different types of coaches, healers, other modalities? Love it all.
Yeah. I haven't even really thought about my healers as coaches, but they absolutely were.
They are.
The most important one was an acupuncturist named Dr. Heyman Cho. She's in the Bay Area and like comes to LA sometimes. But, she's the one that really forced me to not stop living in spite of my body and start living because of my body and really focusing on my body as a vehicle because I definitely would push myself way too hard, way too often. I had my first ulcer when I was 14. Like this was not a new trend for me. I was a very stressed out, high achiever mentality person. But I was really killing myself. I went to the ER like several times once because my whole back froze up and I swore that like my spine was severed or something like that. I compared to childbirth, I will still say that that was more painful that time. And so, but no, everyone just kept on prescribing me, medication, like lots of opiates and muscle relaxers. And after 10 days of just lying basically in a coma on my bed, I was like, this is not the answer. And so I was able to find this amazing healer who's been so transformative in my ability to just focus on my body because I live because I have a body and that is everything. And so I really had a separation of like head and body before. I
And
was
her
like my
body.
intelligence, like everything was all about my brain and my ideas and things that I was going to go do. But like you can't do any of those if you don't have a body and if you're not taking care of your body. So I hope that message reaches someone who needs it today, that you need to take care of your body first and foremost. Amazing coach came from like the engineering team at Google that really helped me think like structurally about my business. There was a structure, a framework that I love that she gave me, where every single challenge that you run into in business was a people, process, or oh my gosh, it's 4 P's: a people, a process, or a product problem. Sorry, one
Yeah.
of the 3 things there, which really helps you figure out like, is this employee the problem? Is it a process that we have for this the problem? Or is the product itself that what we're working on the problem? And so really being able to understand where the problem specifically lies, so you're not treating the wrong part of the challenge that you're running into. That was really huge for me. An amazing coach that I worked with, her name's Ellen Leanne. She's written books called like Happiness Hacks, and she was a coach for many people. She was like my real first mentor